Hello and welcome to Odessa Search's YouTube channel. I'm Claire Ackers and this is part of our series on tech leaders in Yorkshire. Today I'm with Mark Prince.
Hi.
Who heads up a business unit at one of the world's largest systems integrators. He's passionate about transformation and has a great track record in building and turning around teams. He's married, he has 2 children and he lives in Harrogate. So Mark, lovely to see you today.
Really pleased to be here, thanks Claire.
So could you start off by giving us an overview of your background and what you do, if you would?
Certainly. So I took the classic route in. I did computer science at university, then went and started doing software development work, decided I wasn't enjoying it, I went back to university. I'm not the perennial academic, but I did have another 4 years there, did my second degree, again, computer science, did a bit of research, decided to get married, still married, and from that I went contracting, so I went freelance for 5 years, which was great while it lasted. The work was really interesting, it was fast paced, you always found that you had work, and then come about 1999-2000 when the Y2K problem started, hoovering up all the money in the country. Contracting started to dry up. I'd got a bit tired by that point of having lots of responsibility but without the control to affect the sort of change necessary to do the job. So I went over to the dark side and I started managing projects rather than being technical. And then since then I slogged it through, I've done a lot of turnaround work, a lot of rescue work, and it's just driven my career since then really to where I am now.
Okay, great. And could you tell us about the most exciting project you're working on at the moment?
So, at the moment, I'm actually working on a proposal for a project which is commercially rather sensitive, so I can't necessarily get deeply into. Previously, worked on really large-scale, high-availability delivery projects where people die if you get it wrong.
Gosh.
So one of the most satisfying ones of all was when I worked on a national spine programme, which I admit now is a few years ago, but there are people walking around today alive that simply wouldn't have been if we hadn't done that work.
That's amazing.
We really complex implementation. So you're used to home to reinstalling Microsoft Word and it takes half an hour of downtime. Well, in this situation with thousands of servers, we couldn't have any downtime no matter what we did. So we had to build systems and ways of achieving huge software rollouts over 4,000 servers without losing a second of uptime because people would die. So that was quite exciting at the time. It was really hard work. I was with a team that loved and lived the project. It was like skunk works and we achieved great things. And then I moved across into analytics, which is where my current sort of bit is now, and it's very exciting because it's helping to move my client into a whole new world of analytics. They were quite mature in what they've done and they've climbed to the top of the mountain and the clouds are parted and now everyone's realising that there's a brand new and much bigger mountain that we all have to climb to just stay still. If you look at businesses like Amazon, yes, what they do is they'll sell you anything and get it to you tomorrow, but they're amazing at having you buy more things, and that's down to their analytics and how they upsell. It's down to the analytics in their supply chain. So I think that right now is very exciting, and it's kind of where my focus is at the moment.
Yeah, you're very passionate about analytics, aren't you? What do you think the biggest challenge is facing the industry at the moment?
I think all industry at the moment is understanding and transforming. We hear this phrase, you've got to be a digital organisation, and no one really can put a finger on what that means. But realistically what it means is you now need to understand more and have the data in order to make sound business decisions. And if you don't have the data, you've got to work out ways of actually generating the data. So a great example is a Mexican petrochem company who wanted to better manage maintenance in their big refineries because it was all reactive and very expensive and they didn't have good data. So they went and attached vibration sensors to every pipe and every valve in the entire refinery.
Wow.
And then monitored all of that real time, and that started to tell them, oh, that valve over there is starting to vibrate a bit weirdly. We'll change the valve now, long before the valve breaks. So again, with analytics, you shouldn't look at it in terms of the technology. You should always look at it in terms of what is it going to do for my business. These guys ask themselves the question, how do we have better maintenance, cheaper maintenance, and therefore higher productivity if we're not rushing around fixing things that are broken?
Yeah.
And the answer was, you need to take an analytics approach. So I sometimes see projects struggle, or companies struggle, when they take the view of, we need to go and buy huge amounts of kit and then we'll see what happens, rather than have yourself a particular business problem. Even if that problem is, how do I have customers want to shop with me? How do I increase loyalty? How do I decrease churn? How do I be the supply that somebody wants to turn to? And that can be things like effectively managing your social media. There's a wonderful example came through just a couple of days ago of a friend of mine who was very upset with his telco company who were providing his broadband, and he tweeted on their page, really upset, you're not helping me, you're not fixing my problems. And a rival telco company tweeted back and said, come to us, here's a deal. Now, yes, it's cheeky, but what underpins that?
It's powerful.
It is absolutely powerful, because we're all talking about what happened in that instance. And you can't do that on a large scale with people constantly checking Twitter. You need the ability to feed the messages up, to then be spotted and be seen to have significance, and to balance that with, yes, if we poach this customer in just this way, you can't spend enough money to market that good feeling that came out of that big LinkedIn storm that happened with just somebody really smart from one telco going, oh, what if we start watching our competition's Facebook feeds to see who's really upset? Because every conversion you make has a big positive marketing impact as well.
Absolutely.
So I think, again, that's completely technology independent, but the question you ask is, how do I see the right information at the right time, and can I make the right decision on it?
It's real time as well, isn't it? It's
absolutely
very
real
reactive.
time, yeah. You can't go back to this guy 2 weeks later. You have to react to that tweet within 30 minutes when it's really fresh.
Fair enough. What do you love most about being part of the sector, would you say?
The IT sector? I think it's just how it's changed society.
Okay.
And how it's enabled so much. So we're now in a society where the customer has tremendous amounts of power all of a sudden. And they have a voice. Now, admittedly, that voice is sometimes screaming in a bell jar to people who scream the same thing back to you, so it isn't necessarily the most effective thing at that point. But now the customers themselves, and with people complain about globalization, but the other side of that coin is, if I'm not getting the service I want locally, I can have something shipped in from France within 48 hours. So it's forcing everybody to up their game, because the customers themselves are now far more in charge of what goes on, and customers will demand or cause an emerging trend, and then the businesses themselves have to work out, goodness me, how do we jump on that, and how do we get first to market, rather than the old days of telling you what was best for you. And I think it's been wildly democratizing. So even things like instant messenger. So we use it in our company. Many companies use instant messenger internally, and that's really democratizing. You don't have to worry about ringing up or finding somebody senior and having the fear of contacting them. They are now used to being contacted by many more people in their organisation, much more informally. So I think just what IT is doing for society, and the fact that it is utterly ubiquitous, the smartphone penetration, 4G penetration, the fact that I just expect my world now to be instant and doing what I want it to do, and I don't really many of us don't like waiting. I think the downside is we've also shortened our attention spans somewhat, so it's not all for free. There's always a quid pro quo.
It's amazing the world that our kids are growing up in. I remember my daughter getting hold of my laptop and trying to look at a photo and getting cross because she couldn't couldn't zoom in on the screen. She had to use a mouse.
Well, and I think this is where Apple blazed the trail. They didn't design a device to be cheap. They designed a device to have to be phenomenally easy to use. So my grandfather's 94, and when he was 90 we bought him an iPad.
Wow.
First time he's ever had any kind of technology really in his hands, and he lives on it. So Apple have managed to completely take the technology out of the experience and out of the engagement. And there are many other companies do just a good job, but they managed to get first to market. And so I'm not necessarily praising Apple, but the fact is technology is now enabling a 94-year-old chap. He checks his stocks every morning, reads the paper, wants to see how his football team's doing. So he suddenly got, he reads ebooks on it. He's suddenly got this whole world open to him for a piece of silicon and plastic about this big.
And is that keeping you in touch with the world?
It does, yeah. We FaceTime. So it helps. He lives about 80 miles away from me, so I see him relatively regularly, but we certainly FaceTime at least sort of once a week.
That's fantastic.
And it's just so easy to use.
Let's delve a bit into your background.
Okay.
What would you consider your top accomplishment to be?
There's several, I think, and they aren't. They're all at 120 degrees to each other.
Okay.
So professionally, it was landing the role that I landed this time, which is the sort of leading a business unit for P&L, if you like, because I had to take a big risk to do it. It was a big personal risk. It was an area of the business where there were issues and people were sort of sailing around it and not wanting to engage, and I said, I'll fix it. And the company rewarded me appropriately with a promotion. So I think professionally it was taking that calculated risk based on, I know I can do this. Sometimes the only solution is something no one's ever done before, because if it had been previously done and we knew about it, we would have applied it and it would have been successful. So you have to be comfortable being out of your comfort zone sometimes, and you're relying on your skill, your raw cunning, your network, your friends and your advice to get the job done. So I think getting that job was quite powerful. And then as a complete flip side, being accepted as a music teacher for teaching ukulele, just because I picked the instrument up 4 years ago and I've never played an instrument before. And it was getting over the imposter syndrome, if you like, of suddenly being around these professional musicians who've done it for years, who were quite accepting and supportive and have let me be in as one of their own. So that's a completely different personal kind of growth. And then the other side of it is happy marriage, 2 healthy kids, and you think about the roof over your head and you worry about the world, but basically if you've got family life and no health issues, you kind of have to count that as a very important thing. So I divide them up into 3.
You've sounds like you've got a good balance there.
Worked hard to do it. I've always travelled to get the right work, so I was incredibly career motivated when I was younger, and when we didn't have kids you can be much more mobile.
Sure.
So I've always moved to chase the right job rather than just sort of stayed locally for whatever came up, and it's had pros and cons. It boosted my career, but it meant I was away from home during the early years of my kids, and that can be, it was hard on my wife. So yeah, I've lost
Getting there,
yeah. Lost the thread a little bit.
That's all we can do.
Yeah, it is.
I hear you've got a bit of a ukulele collection as well.
I'm doing very well. I only have 3. My daughter's got 8, so she's the one with ukulele addictive syndrome, not me. I've only got 3.
Fair enough. Well, what's the biggest mistake or failure you've if you care to tell us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I had a startup company.
Okay.
And I had a very good friend, Sasha, with the business, who kept giving me advice, which was stop technically innovating, start selling. You're not selling enough, and that's really where your skills need to be in this business. So we developed a product, we sold it to a bunch of clients, sold it relatively easily. We took some of that money that we'd made and put it into developing round 2 of the product. Could not sell it for love nor money.
Oh, really?
And because people had run out of money, the sort of credit crunch was on the way, businesses were struggling, and we gone from businesses that really understood the product to saying, look, I'm struggling to make payroll.
Wow.
So I'm not investing in this, even though it could have been difficult for them if it hadn't come off. So what I should have done is I should have loaded the sales pipeline. I should have worried only about selling this thing, and I should not have worried about it. I should have had the different issue, which was how do I deal with the technical issues I've created by the sales I've generated.
Yeah.
So I folded the business really cleanly, no debt. We didn't make the targets, we shut it. Nobody lost a penny, apart from me. But I learned so much about where to focus and listen harder to advice sensibly given. So that was the biggest, I'd say the biggest failure really.
It sounds like you're a person who really enjoys putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
You thrives being out of the comfort zone.
I think so. It was when I used to be a consultant in and around London in the city and the stock exchange, and I used to have consultants in my team, I had to say to them, look, you've got to be comfortable being out of your comfort zone. The reason why we've been brought in as a consultant engagement is because they haven't been able to do it themselves, and they've tried every tool in the book. Now they've had someone else in and that hasn't worked, and now they've called us in, and yes, we're very expensive, but the point is we're drawing down on experience rather than getting a playbook out, because none of that's worked anymore. So yeah, I think it's the challenge, something new that drives your career forward. 10 years of experience is doing 10 new things, not doing the same year of experience 10 times over.
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, you've always got to be moving on and stepping up and taking a risk.
Okay. Let's change tack slightly.
Certainly.
In your opinion, what's the ideal recruitment process?
I like that question. Everyone loves to be headhunted.
Okay.
So I think I'd love to be headhunted. I'd love to be called up and said, you know what, there's this amazing role and you are the most amazingest person for it. The problem with that is being noticed. I think the flip side of this is, I think the recruitment business has in some ways gone a little bit too far towards word matching in CVs and everything else. So
keyword bingo.
Keyword bingo. And if you're in a more ephemeral or a more leadership position, it's much harder to be seen that way through. So I think where we all need to get to is self-marketing, and then that is how you will be seen and you will be picked and cherry-picked for the most amazing job you've ever wanted. So I think the business the people like me in the business need to learn self-marketing if you want to land that amazing job that you're looking for.
Okay. Thinking about recruiting for your team, do you have a favourite killer interview question you like to ask?
I try and stay away from all the more typical rude ones. So, putting someone on the spot and saying, what's your biggest fault? You'll always get back, I work too hard. It's a kind of false game of tennis, is that?
Yeah.
I tend to I like to look for where people's knowledge ends, but I want them to be comfortable. So I'll make sure, I'll tell people, I'm going to ask you some more technical questions for argument's sake, but I'm probing the end of your knowledge. It's okay to tell me when you've run out. I'd much sooner see if that's the kind of person I can work with.
Okay.
Do I click with you? Do we have a value set which is relatively well arranged? Are you up for the work that's going to come along? And if someone's not a perfect skill match, but I can see the real potential in there, or the real ability to grow, I'll want that person rather than someone with an amazing skill match but aren't really suitable, say, for a stressful job, or they like a job which is very well defined, whereas we actually need to go into some vague territory and solve the problem over there. So I tend to look for that click. There's some technical underpinnings, you need to have certain skills in order to be able to achieve the job. So I steer away from, although I do like the why a manhole covers round.
That's a new one on me.
It really delves into sort of analytical thinking. So a circle is the most efficient shape to do it, and a circle won't fall down a manhole cover because of the shape it is.
Makes sense.
But if you're transporting thousands of manhole covers, you want them to be hexagonal because they fit better in the back of a wagon.
Ah, yeah.
So I like questions like that, which really make people have to stop and analyse and solve a problem.
Assess their way of approaching a problem. Yeah, no, makes sense. And very briefly, what's your pet hate on a CV?
On a CV or in an interview, it's being caught out in a lie.
Ah.
If I find that someone's in front of me wasting my time and they've blagged their way in, that interview ends really quickly. The flip side is, like I say, if someone's they're in and we know there's a knowledge gap, that isn't necessarily the end of the world, but blagging it, I think, that's not a shared value set we can work with.
Brilliant. Mark, it's been amazing speaking to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.